Well, now we have, and I have to say, this is one of those shows that comes out of one of the great television shows of all time, one show that I grew up on, which is Carl Sagan's Cosmos. And we're talking to the hosts and creators of Cosmos Possible Worlds. We have Anne Drugan, who is the creator, writer, director, and executive producer, so massive amount of names. Neil deGrasse Tyson, host, and of course, Jeffrey A. Oakham, who's our visual effects supervisor. Now, we have a lot to talk about, and you've got clearly, when you're talking about Cosmos Possible Worlds, big topics to talk about. But before we do that, let's take a look at a clip, or rather a real nice overview of Cosmos Possible Worlds.
We were hunters and foragers. The frontier was everywhere. We were bounded only by the earth and the ocean and the sky. The open road still softly calls, like a nearly forgotten song of childhood. Despite our limitations and fallibilities, we humans are capable of greatness. How far will our nomadic species have wandered by the end of the next century and the next millennium? Who will we become in the far future?
Now, the season of Cosmos Possible Worlds debuted in March on Nat Geo. And look, Neil, you're one of the great known scientists of our time. And clearly with your work and your work at NASA and your work with your husband, Carl Sagan, one of the great popularizers of science. But Jeffrey, I have to tell you, the show looks amazing with those visual effects.
Thank you.
You are an acclaimed visual effects supervisor, but there's some stuff here that literally is out of this world, mind-blowing. Which leads me to ask you, what was the biggest challenge in terms of visual effects for this series?
The biggest challenge is to make science what it is, to demonstrate what Anne and Brandon wrote in an understandable way, following the script. But what's really important about this is that my journey, I'm a nut about cosmos and space and science, but my journey was to put up on the screen what they wrote. I had to do a lot of research, and Anne and Neil and Brandon and Andre Bormanis, our science advisor, exposed me to all manner of documentation and people to have the conversations. So what the effects had to do was not just tell the story, but to show the natural beauty that exists in science. And then I was just telling Anne before we started that when you look at the visual effects out of context, they're great. But when you look at them in context, it's the story that I was illustrating that Anne and everybody wrote. It's the story that makes these visual effects so great. It was an honor and so exciting.
Well, and you did an amazing job. And Neil, so often when you see these, and no disrespect to other shows, but on shows like this, often when you see the visual effects, you immediately in your mind see the host stand. You think, oh, he's standing in a room surrounded by green screens in this. But the way that Anne, that you and your collaborators have written this, Neil, the way you're fronting it, it is such for lack of a better expression, organic process. I wanted to get a sense from you. Like, this is obviously your second run at a part of the Cosmos franchise. For you, what was the story that you really wanted to tell in this series, and how do you think it was told?
Well, I'm not going to pick my favorite scene. That's like picking your children. But what I can tell you is just think about the history of visual effects and what role they've played in cinema. It's so often, let's say if it's a horror flick and there's some monster that's attacking a town, then the visual effects is intended to make the monster more scary or bigger or more terrifying, right? Or if there's a disaster film and you want to show an earthquake, it's got to be that much more sort of authentically scary. And so, okay, that's a lot of what visual effects have been used for over the years. But now ask yourself, has anyone thought to bring visual effects to actual science? Just, we're not inventing a story where we need the most extreme version of what it is that meets our fears. We're just trying to portray actual known things that happen in the actual universe. And not everything in the universe is equally as representable in a normal sort of camera or telescopic image. For example, if you want to visit a galaxy, what would that look like as you plunge through? I think in the extreme example for Cosmos, we represented what happened inside of an atom. Well, nobody's ever been there. Yeah, we're made of atoms, but nobody's ever been there. But we know mathematically from quantum physics, we know what's going on. And so we feed that information to a visual effects expert, Jeff, and his team, and then they portray that. And so now the task of Cosmos is just simply showing you reality, not trying to invent some crazy version or some more intense version of a reality, just reality. And so what a privilege it is to have people with such talents that have historically been applied to other forms of storytelling, to bring that talent to bear on just what is simply real life, the real universe.
Well, speaking of which, and clearly the original Cosmos was legendary television. It's still, as I said, one of the greatest television shows ever made, and award winning. But you brought back a first revival of Cosmos a few years back, and now Cosmos Possible World. So let's call this sort of like Series 2.1 now. Why do you think that Cosmos not only endures, but has also remained so popular?
I think it responds to a deep yearning that virtually every one of us has to feel connected to the universe. And we have all kinds of counterfeit ways of getting that feeling. Astrology, pseudoscience. But science itself, because that is its fundamental focus and objective, really delivers the goods. And so when in the first Cosmos, when Carl and Steve Soder and I were saying, me, you, everyone is made of star stuff, we were mining the truth of science. And
a little bit of Oscar Wilde or Shakespeare.
I love Oscar Wilde, and I love Shakespeare, certainly. So I'll take that. Of course, we were all reflecting the sum total of our experience, but we wanted to make the argument for science and a scientific perspective, not just as a way to heighten the literacy of the global audience, but also as a kind of spiritual awakening to the beauty of nature, and also as a survival mechanism for our species. Because if it doesn't matter what's true to us, we're doomed.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for making yet another incredible season of Cosmos. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Neil and Jeffrey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dominic.